Maybe
So we are.
maybe I need some privileges from you that you are the organizer.
Yes, just 1 second because we are online actually.
Okay.
So first of all, I wanted to ask if the other presenters are also in the session, because we are supposed to be 4 in this session, and the names that I have are, of course, myself, Stefano Di Bucchianico, Luis Torres, Daniel Torres Gonzalez. Then we have Jean Langlois Berthelot, I don't know if the pronunciation is correct, and then André Mellini. But I don't see them here. So perhaps we wait for them before starting.
Okay.
There is Luis, there is Marville that is writing in the chat.
Okay.
I don't know if...
I don't think so.
Yes, we know Marvel, but we have problems with the presentations. So I was able to share mine, but Luis is having issues, and I don't actually know how to help him. And moreover, I called for the other 2 presenters, but they don't seem to be here. So we were just still waiting before officially starting with the session. Okay, Marvel is suggesting to send the slides to me.
Yeah, I'm doing this.
Okay.
Okay.
This is my email.
Can I share to Stefano Di Bucchianico at gmail.com?
I am sending in the chat my email.
Okay. Okay.
So as soon as you send them to me, then I will start with my presentation, and then I will recover your slides.
Yeah, I sent it.
Okay.
Did
I
you
received
receive
them.
it? Okay.
Yes, just 1 second. Perfect. So once again, the last check for the other 2 presenters, that they are not showing up. So in half a minute we start officially with the session. Once again, from the program, in this session we should also have Jean Langlois Berthelot and André Mellini. Just a few seconds, otherwise we start officially with the session.
While you are presenting, I will share the link to the email, because maybe they are not seeing the link in the PDF.
Okay. Yes, if you can do it, it could be very useful. Thank you a lot. As soon as you do it, tell me, because I allow for another minute just to see if they are able to connect.
Yeah, I'm just John. Let me see if I can find John. So I don't send it to all the list. Okay, here. And Andre. Oh, where's Andre? Andre, Mateo. Melini.
So let's move forward in this way. We are now at almost at 2:10. At let's say in 5 minutes we start.
Yeah.
So you have the time.
By any chance, do you have the email of Andre Melini?
Unfortunately, I don't, because the overall the general organization sent the emails to all the participants. So I took for granted that it was not necessary to go ahead with inviting the single presenters in the session.
Matthews. I already sent it to Jean.
Thank you.
I cannot see it. Yeah, I don't see him in the list.
Okay.
Yeah. Which university?
Don't worry. If you cannot find him, it's fine. I mean.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's see. Where's email? Yeah, here it is. I found it online. Yeah, I already did. So.
Okay, let's wait 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, we are in no rush because the session is supposed to last for a couple of hours.
Okay.
We are supposed to be presenting for 50 minutes each. Therefore, I can allow for some flexibility to see whether they are able to connect.
Okay.
Just another couple of minutes. Otherwise, we will be presenting just the two of us.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I also try to upload your set of slides. There was Marvil
Yeah.
that tried to connect.
That's you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Marvil?
Yes.
I was just waiting some minutes because the other two presenters are not here. So we tried to reach them out by email. And so I was just waiting 1 second. In a couple of minutes, we will start if they don't show up.
So, Stefano, you're a very professional and extremely kind chair. But I think we could start maybe with
Okay.
Luis and you. And then if the other two panelists join the discussion, then it's good. They will present. Otherwise, just the two of us, the three of us, and the friends that are following us on YouTube can jump in the discussions. What do you say?
Okay. It's fine with me. Just one thing left. As you suggested, I also uploaded the slides of Luis.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me I'm moving from my control. I'm moving forward with the slides, but it seems to me that they are not. I mean, in the presentation, they are not moving. Am I correct?
Could you
Yeah,
check?
they're
not moving.
They're not moving.
They're stuck. Okay.
Because that's what we did in a previous session. We had some problems with my presentation, for instance, and I sent the slides. Oh, they moved.
I'm moving it now. I don't know what is happening, but I'm in control.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
That's fine.
So let's go for it.
Okay.
So, Luis, what about you start first, if you agree, so I can manage to see if the other presenters join the conversation. Would it be fine with you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so let me start officially with the session. I'm sorry with the delay due to some technical problems. This is the ordinary session J, whose title is Advanced Topics on Development Economics. The rules of the game are the usual ones. Each presenter is allotted 15 minutes for a presentation. I will check the time schedule, and I will tell you when you have around 5 minutes left. So, Luis, please go ahead. The floor is yours. You can start with your presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stefano and Marwil, and all the organizers of the Structural Development Macroeconomics third conference. I'm very pleased to be here. So I want to talk to you about some progress that I've been doing with other colleagues on a multi-sectoral model of induced technical change. And in this time, I will try to discuss some of the implications for models of input-output analysis. In 1964, Charles Kennedy presented his classic paper on induced technical change, trying to represent Hicks's hypothesis of induced innovations. And 9 years later, in a not well-known paper, Kennedy also, in the Economic Journal, published a generalization of his model, the induced technical change model for end commodities and end sectors. In this paper, and assuming the stability of the rates of technical change and the cost structure in each sector of the economy, he derived some sectoral and macroeconomic implications, which are consistent with the results of his 1964 paper. And these results are obtained from assuming that there are N+1 industries, and capital goods industries, and only one consumption good industry, which is a highly restricted version of the economy. And he uses multi-inputs production functions. Each one of the sectors has an innovation possibility frontier, and in each sector, the entrepreneurs in each sector seek to maximize the rate of cost reduction in the same way as his macroeconomic industrial change of 1964 63. Now, based on an alternative model, I obtained some of his results. I replaced the use of production functions with an accounting framework. And in this accounting framework, each sector can produce either means of productions or consumption commodities. So it's a little bit more general. Currently, with a colleague, Jiahao Yang, we have been working on the stability for the one commodity model of the induced technical change, something that Kennedy didn't do. However, in this model, we are going to assume, just like Kennedy, the stability of the equilibrium for the general case of multiple commodities. So in this paper, I developed some implications for multi-sectoral production models, which is something that Kennedy did not pursue in his original paper. First and most importantly, based on the results of this model, multi-sectoral induced technical change model, I'm going to show that there's a new way, in some ways, richer alternative foundations for the constancy of the input-output coefficients, and therefore for the input-output methodology. Some other results that I'm not going to talk about this in this presentation, except for these 2 bullet points, is that the model also produces endogenously stationary capital compositions, which can be used for production prices with technical change, something that it is not possible, or it is not typical to do it in the traditional Sarrafian price of production system. And also the model produces functions of capital accumulations and rates of cost reduction that can be used as an alternative for the for the study of production networks. Okay, so the implications of the results first. In traditional applied input-output analysis, one typically starts with a typical the input-output model. X is equal to matrix A times the vector X plus Y, no? In this model, there's the A matrix with the input-output coefficients. Those are the empirical ones. So they are based on ratios of value flows. With this model, then one can forecast or estimate the output production of different types of final demand compositions and scales. And for instance, what will be the production of an increase in 5% of automobiles from Mexico to the European Union or to the United States, for instance, no? No, the application of this model relies on the constancy of the coefficients. Now, what are the economic justification for the constancy of these coefficients? So Leontiev, he assumes that there's a proportionality in the physical quantities of production and inputs, and argues that the value flows that we see on national accounts represent mostly technical factors. And also, he also says that the coefficients are stable over time. Those are his motivation of the economic arguments for the constancy of the coefficients. Other literature, like the non-substitution theorem and some work that Klein developed, which is used in the production network literature, uses production functions and but without technical change. And what I'm going to try to argue is that the multisectoral induced technical change model produces endogenously stationary coefficients. In this way, and if income distribution dynamics are fixed, then we're going to have constant coefficients, and therefore these results provide alternative foundations for the input-output methodology. So let me tell you a little bit about the model. So it is a classical model. There's a market economy, no joint production, single production, full specialization, circulating commodities, and the institutional sectors and wealth composition. So there's no government. It's a closed economy. We only have workers and capitalists. The wages are part of the capital advance. And so the capital advance is equal to the wages plus the value of the means of production. We also assume long period positions, so there's homogeneous labor, uniform rates of wages and profits, and there's a one price for all sellers and consumers in the industry, and the technology is viable. So from with this assumption, we start in each sector. The value decomposition, the accounting decomposition is that the value in each industry is equal to the wage cost plus the means of production cost plus profit, right? Inserting all these assumptions, then we can have this long expression at the bottom of the slide where the value is equal to price times quantity, wage cost is equal to the wage rate times the quantity of homogeneous labor, and so on and so forth. This is pretty standard in the description of linear production models. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the cost structure and the technology description first. So we are going to have the cost structure. Sorry, the total cost is equal to the wage cost plus the cost of the means of production. If we divide by the quantity produced, then we're going to have unit costs. Okay, and we also have cost shares, which we are going to denote by lambda and kappa. So lambda j is going to be the wage cost divided by the total cost, and the cost of the means of production I is going to be kappa ij in the j sector. It's also the value of this input is also divided by the total cost, and then with this we have the total cost. So if we sum in each sector the lambdas and all the kappas, and the lambda and all the kappas, the sum is equal to 1. It's just the cost decomposition. And the description of technology, we are going to have a labor productivity in each sector, and we are going to have n means of production productivities, each one for all the inputs. Based on this cost and technology description, if we take logarithms and take derivatives in terms of time, we will have the cost, growth, and technical change accounting. And the most important part here is that we're going to define, if we define the negative of the rate, so C hat is the rate of growth of unit cost. If we take the negative of this, is going to be what we call the rate of cost reduction, which is just a weighted average of the price and the quantity changes. All the variables, and right now we don't have parameters. All our variables functions of time. Now we introduce the induced technical change assumptions. So we're going to have constant input distribution dynamics. So a constant wage share, a constant rate of growth of the wage rate, and a constant rate of profit. The behavioral assumption is that the entrepreneurs, they have the capitalists, they have incentives for the maximizations of the rate of cost reduction. The only action variable is the selection or the innovation of new techniques of production, which yields a technical change. There is no uncertainty about the effects of this technical change, and there is expected that the cost shares of today are going to hold tomorrow. Finally, there's a multi-input innovation possibility frontier, which is strictly concave, and we can represent it as gamma j is a function j of the chi's, which are the chi's are the growth rate of productivity of the means of production, and gamma is the growth rate of the labor productivity. From this, we have a pretty straightforward, strictly concave maximization program in each sector. So we're going to maximize the part of the part of the rate of cost reduction that relates to the productivity of the inputs, subject to the innovation possibility frontier, which is characterized by the two next inequality lines. Constructing the Lagrangian, taking the first order conditions, we find the solutions or the equilibrium rates of technical change, which are given by the last two equations in inequalities. So what this result says that the economy will obtain an equilibrium growth rate of labor productivity and means of production productivity, depending on the current cost structure of the economy. Okay, it's going to be dependent on these relative cost shares, which I call the cost structure for each one of the inputs and in the different sectors. Now, as long as the income distribution and the cost shares are given, we will have the following results. Because if I go back a little bit, if we change the kappas and the lambdas, the equilibrium positions will change. But if these cost structure are constant, then there's not gonna be a movement in the rates of productivity change of each one of the inputs. So as long as they are constant, one of the results is that we're gonna have stationary rates of technical change in each one of the n+1 inputs, all the means of production productivities and the labor productivity. We're also going to have stationary growth rates of production prices, something that I do not show here, but it's one of the results of the paper that we are working on. The third result is that there's going to be also a stationarity rate of cost reduction. I have one minute left. I'm almost done. In spite that the rate of growth of the wage rate is constant and the rate of profit is constant, technical change modifies the cost structures, and therefore the stationary, and also is going to move the stationary values of the previous two results. So if we assume at this moment that the cost structure or the relative cost shares are stationary, then we're going to have the following four extra results, which are a stationarity of the individual cost shares. We're also going to have a stationarity of the input cost output value ratios, which are no other thing than the traditional input output coefficients. And also we're going to have also some other results that I'm skipping result 6 and concentrating on the stationarity also of capital composition. And I just go back to one of the first slides to emphasize the results. So result number 5 is that the model endogenously produces the stationarity of the ratio of the value of inputs and the value of outputs, which constitute an alternative foundation for the constancy of the empirical input-output coefficients, and therefore for the methodology of input-output. The next bullets are just a repetition of what I said, and the only new thing is that the last bullet point. If you remember your lecture of the traditional textbook of input-output analysis, just like the Miller and Blair, they use production functions to argue for the constancy of the empirical input-output coefficients, which are not empirical sound, because production functions are only sustainable only for physical quantities, not for value quantities. So the multisectoral input-output, the multisectoral industrial technical change model could be an alternative foundation for input-output analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Luis. Now we can open the floor to questions. Let me check at first whether on the YouTube channel some question shows up. It doesn't seem so. So meanwhile, I can ask a couple of things, a couple of curiosities. At a certain point of your presentation, correct me if I'm wrong, I could have missed something. You argued that one of the hypotheses that you are making is that income distribution is constant. But at another point, you referred to the fact that you suppose the rate of profit to be zero. So I was wondering, I saw R equal to zero, right? So I was wondering if the two are consistent, these two hypotheses are consistent in the sense that if you suppose that the rate of profit is zero, of course, you have constant income distribution, but in the sense that basically you are canceling out one distributive variable. So I was wondering first if there is a consistency between these two points, and second, I would ask how relevant is this in light of your results, in the sense that, okay, it could be a working hypothesis for sure, but doesn't it endanger somewhat the empirical application of your ideas? Because we know, of course, the rate of profit is not zero in the real world. So I'm wondering about this specific point.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my answer, I go back to the YouTube channel once again to see if there are questions. There are no questions, so if you wish, you can go ahead.
I think Marwil has a question.
Yes,
or he's speaking, but we cannot hear you.
3 years after the pandemic, and I still make the same mistake of the microphone. Keep the microphone muted. No. I mean, it was more a clarification because I might have missed something. But we're talking about innovation, right? So you have like induced technical change, and I was wondering if you could go over again how innovation is entering in this framework, because it's not related to the number of sectors, for example, that you have. Yeah. So could you clarify that?
Yeah, thank you very much for your questions. So the assumption in this model on income distribution are for its dynamics. So we are assuming a constant growth rate of the wage rate and zero growth rate of the rate of profit. So the rate of profit could be 5%, 10%, whatever, but we need to hold it fixed. If it is fixed, and the rate, the level, and also in the wage rate, this variable can change in time, but we need the rate of change to be constant for this. So these are the two assumptions in terms of distribution. Okay. This model, in comparison with Kennedy's model, does not, because we are starting from a classical framework and an accounting framework. The link between cost shares and income distribution is not the same. As in, I don't know if you have read Kennedy's paper, but for him is the same thing: the cost share and the wage share. For instance, the wage cost, the wage share cost and the wage share are the same. Here we don't have this because we're beginning with a much richer accounting framework. Yeah, so in terms of dynamics, is only the dynamics which are constrained. And in terms of innovation, so in assumption 7, innovation enters as the possibility, the relationship between each one of the, okay, so capitalists evaluate alternative techniques or developed or try to develop new techniques of production, which changes the productivities of each one of the inputs. And where we are assuming here with the multi-input innovation possibility frontier, which is something that is very close to Kaldor's technical progress function is that there is a trade-off between the productivities of each one of the sectors. So if you want to increase the labor productivity, for instance, you will have to decrease the productivity of computers or tables and kitchens and stuff. So there is a trade-off in the. It doesn't mean that this. Yeah. So there's a trade-off. If you want to increase the productivity in one, it's gonna be at the expense of reducing the productivity of the other inputs. That's the traditional way of how technical change, the technical progress function, and the innovation possibility frontier works. That there is a trade-off between the possibilities. So this concavity of the function is what makes makes easy to find the equilibrium position of the economy, because you're going to have let's say in three dimensions, you're going to have some capsule, so you will be able to find the equilibrium at one of the
no, my question was going in the direction of, because I've done some work with induced technical change models, but more aggregating, more focusing on labor productivity and dynamics. So what we have, or what we frequently have, is that for example, the cost of labor increases, and because the cost of labor increases, firms respond by increasing their search for labor-saving production techniques, and this increases the rate of labor productivity, right? But now, okay, so it's more or less what is happening here too. Yeah. Okay, but with many inputs, and then you have some sort of trade-offs between the sectors. Okay.
Yeah, this paper started as I didn't know about Kennedy's paper. I searched for multisectoral developments. I couldn't find anything. I did the math. I found some results. And before presenting at a conference, I found out that Kennedy also did it. So it was a little bit frustrating. But what I'm doing is with some other colleagues is to explore the implications of these results. Yeah,
sure. Do you have in mind? Sorry, I'm jumping with too many stuff, but do you have in mind like ecological applications of this? Because part of the discussion on green growth, my impression is it goes on. Okay, you need a certain type of technical change that is to increase the efficiency in the use of energy resources, for example, or to reduce emissions. That it's a subproduct of a certain technology, but at the same time, you want to keep a certain life standards, or to improve, in the case of certain countries, developing countries, to maintain a certain growth rate, which implies a certain growth rate for labor productivity as well. So do you have in mind in this research agenda exploring like environmental applications, or you see this project going more on a theoretical direction?
Right, that's Oslo and Omer. I think she's gonna start working at your university. I think she recommended me actually the same thing to pursue this line of research, and it's something that I will be willing to explore. But right now in the agenda, I think there are some technical issues to solve, especially the stability of this because it relies heavily on the stability of the model, because if you change something, then you're not going to have constant coefficients, right? But I think we are almost about to get the desired results. But yeah, I think whatever you're doing right now in your research, because I've seen some of your work on ecological aspects and technical change, can be approached also in this matter, because you can treat the inputs, I think, in the same way that you are treating in your other models. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Also, if I can add one thing, I am recalling the fact that, for example, there are papers by Daniele Tavani, who, starting from this kind of production function a la Kennedy, it is applied to the issue also of stagnation. Therefore, perhaps I'm not sure. I don't think they have a specific input-output structure so disaggregated as you have. However, looking at those contributions could be useful in the sense that starting from this kind of framework, they also, as Marvel was suggesting, they apply it to a concrete example, that a concrete issue that can be also interesting in light of what you're doing.
Yeah, probably if I just report, or with my colleagues, we only report the technical aspect or just it will just sound like a academic curiosity. If we apply it to something concrete, as you are saying, we might gain some strength or some more justification for its publication in a good journal. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, one last check on the YouTube channel, but it doesn't seem that there are comments or questions. Therefore, I think that we can move to the second presentation, which is the presentation of my work together with two other colleagues. So, do you see my slides?
Not yet.
Okay.
The problem was reversed. Now you are not able to project. Luis stole the control of the
I already deleted my presentation from there.
Okay. Okay.
We can see it now.
Perfect. So just 1 second, I set my time schedule. Okay. So thank you all for being here in this session. What I'm about to present is a work on stagnation and its relation with innovation. This work is now under review, and it is a work of myself together with Matteo De Leidi from the University of Bari and Giovanna Ciaffi from Roma Tre University. Now, a brief introduction to the topic. Basically, we know that it is almost a decade now that there is this lasting discussion about the causes of secular stagnation. And basically, we find two main strands that are the strands from the explanations from the supply side, in particular the one of Robert Gordon, and of course the explanation from the demand side coming from Larry Summers. In this paper, we focus specifically on the supply side explanations, and in particular, we recall what Gordon has pointed out to be an apparent paradox, in the sense that he points out the fact that innovation is going rather on a sustained path, at least innovation that is measured by patenting. However, on the other hand, we have that productivity growth is stagnating. Therefore, this is a paradox that Gordon recalls and that somewhat resembles Solov's paradox in the early 90s. Therefore, what we do is to try to understand whether one element that can enter the explanation of why there is this paradox is the fact that it is important to understand what is the composition of innovation expenditures, and this composition can have an impact on productivity. In fact, what we ask ourselves is, the basic research question is, can productivity stagnation can be, of course, at least partially explained by the fact that the ratio between public and private expenditures in innovation is falling in the United States, and also in advanced countries more in general. In order to understand this, we carry out an SVAR analysis on a US dataset, quarterly dataset that spans the period 1948 to 2019. And we estimate the effect of public expenditure in innovation on productivity and private R&D. In a previous version, we also had the effect on GDP, but then in the final version, we preferred to focus in particular on the first two indicators. We compare also this effect with the effect of private expenditure in innovation on productivity as well, to see what are the results of this comparison. The main finding is that, as we expected, public innovation spending has a positive effect on productivity. In general, public spending has a greater effect with respect to private expenditure in innovation on productivity. And besides, in addition to this, we also have that public expenditure in innovation also has a strong crowding in effect on private investment in R&D. Another additional result is that public investment in innovation also generates positive fiscal multipliers. Therefore, we can affirm that this element is relevant in contributing to explaining stagnation. Now, I will be rather quick on the literature review. The main point in the literature based on Gordon is the fact that there is a supposition. From the supply side, the kind of innovations that are entering the United States economy in the last decades do not have the same potential if we compare them with the previous waves of innovation. They do not have the same potential to boost long-term economic growth. Therefore, one of the points, Gordon stresses many points, but the fundamental point in this case is the fact that the type of innovation has not the same potential of what we were used to have in previous decades. There are also other authors such as Rame that also stress this point. But what we find interesting is that together with this kind of intuition given by Gordon, we also have an alternative that is gaining traction in recent years, that is the alternative based on the fact that we could be encountering rising costs to generate new ideas. Therefore, we have, for example, the contributions of Fernald and Jones that make this kind of supposition. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but the formula is not showing in the slides. And together with this, there is also the contribution of Bloom and other authors that stress the fact that the productivity of research is continuously falling in a lot of sectors. Therefore, the counter factor that can help in sustaining growth should be a continuous rise in research efforts, in the sense of hiring additional researchers and spending more and more on innovation in order to counterbalance this falling research productivity. Therefore, we have Gordon, changing type of innovation. Fernald and Jones, rising cost of finding new ideas. Together with this, there is also the issue stressed by the IMF, Van Reenen, Archibugi, Filippetti, and others, that concerns the fact that the public sector is steadily retreating from actively taking part in innovation. And given that public and private innovations are not, they cannot be, we cannot substitute perfectly one with the other, then we can suppose that we will have long-term issues in boosting productivity, if there is the trend that we experience. Turning the attention to the United States case, we can see that indeed there is evidence for what Gordon is pointing out, because as we can see, during the decades, we do not have a decreasing pattern, but neither a flat pattern. We have a rise in both patent applications and also patent applications intensity, which is a measure in which we normalize patents applications by hours worked. We can see that there is a rising trend in the last decades. And together with this, we have a falling trend for the growth rates of labor productivity. Therefore, this is the, if you wish, a descriptive representation of the intuition stressed by Gordon. Together with this, we also have a falling ratio between government R&D over total R&D, therefore the sum of government plus private sector plus business R&D. Now, what we do is to grounding on these intuitions from the literature, we built a data set in which we have quarterly data of the variables are ordered in the same list in which we will also find them in the empirical application. Therefore, we have government gross investment in R&D, government consumption and investment net of the government R&D spending. Therefore, it is a sort of residual public expenditure. Then we have business R&D, GDP, measure of patent intensity in which we normalize patent applications by hours worked. And then we have two measures of productivity. We have on one hand the labor productivity, which is real GDP divided by hours worked, and then a index for total factor productivity. We use hours worked to normalize some of the variables and also the GDP deflator to make all nominal variables in real terms. Now, what we do, there are initial assumptions that I'm not going to recall for the sake of staying within time constraints. We apply, as said, an SBIR modeling structure in which we have that deordering in which we suppose the variables to be, which is an order such as that the first variable is the most exogenous, and then we have all the others with a decreasing degree of exogeneity. Therefore, the two variables that we use as most endogenous are the indicators for patents and also one indicator of productivity. Therefore, in order to also test for robustness of the results, we have that in one model we use labor productivity, in the other model we replace labor productivity with total factor productivity. We use the government R&D as the most exogenous variable, in particular because we are analyzing the case of the United States. Therefore, we know that within R&D there is a high share that is absorbed by military R&D, and therefore it has a strategic value that other types of expenditure do not possess. Then we have generic public expenditure. Then we suppose that business R&D and GDP are more endogenous with respect to public expenditure measures. And then we have the effects, as said, on patents and labor productivity. Now, we estimate the impulse response functions for the model, but what is more relevant in order to convey the basic meaning of our results is what we find in these tables, in which we have that, for example, in this case, we are seeing the cumulative elasticity of labor productivity with respect to the variables that you find in the first column. Therefore, we have, in the model one, we have the responses of labor productivity to government R&D, generic public expenditure, private R&D, and patents. Then you have the same results, but with a subsample that stops at 2007 in order to check whether the Great Recession makes a particular impact on our results. Then you have the cumulated responses over an horizon that goes up until 25 quarters. And the last two columns are the peak value of the elasticity, which is the highest value throughout what we simulate, and then the average value over all the time horizons. In bold, you find the results that are significant. Now, as we can see, the two measures of public expenditure exhibit a higher impact to productivity with respect to private R&D. And I will jump now to an analogous table in which we replaced. So what we see here is exactly the same things that we have in the other table, but we replaced the measure of productivity. Therefore, we use an index for total factor productivity. In this case, the results are even stronger in the sense that government R&D is actually the most relevant variable in the sense of explaining a change in total factor productivity. And therefore, in general, we can say that government R&D is a very relevant variable, and in both specifications is more relevant than private R&D. And in this case, another thing to notice is that it is the only variable that is that has a consistent, if a significant effect throughout the simulation period. Together with this, we also calculate what we call the R&D crowding in multipliers. Now, in this case, what we have, once again, two models in order to check for two different samples, two different time spans, 25 quarters as the horizon. In this case, we have the effect on private R&D accepted by government and generic public expenditure, government R&D and generic public expenditure. In this case, what we find are multipliers that can be read in the sense of the amount in dollars of private R&D generated by $1 more of government expenditure, either in R&D or generic public expenditure. As we can see, there is a strong response, strong crowding in response of private R&D with respect to government R&D, while the response to generic public expenditure, as we may expect, is much lower. I'm going to the conclusions because I have just 1 minute left. Overall, therefore, what we can find is that we can suppose, grounding on our empirical results, we can suppose that the paradox pointed out by Gordon can be, at least partially, of course, explained by the fact that public expenditure in innovation has a strong direct effect on productivity measures and also a strong impact on private R&D. Therefore, if there is a continuous changing composition of innovation expenditures, such as that private R&D is increasingly taking up the lion's share out of total innovation expenditure, this can be a trend that helps in explaining the long-term falling pattern of productivity growth. And therefore, we think that this is an additional element that can be added to the framework of Gordon. Thank you for the attention, and I look forward to receive comments and critiques. So once again, I also check if there are questions on YouTube, but it doesn't seem so. Therefore, if there are questions from the session, I'm happy to hear them.
I will be very rude, and I will let Luis' questions to be later on. I will jump in with a couple of questions of my own. So if you have a VAR, you have a model, you're estimating a model for the United States basically after the World War, the second Great War, right?
Yes.
For the whole period. Have you tried to estimate until the 70s and after the 70s to see these cumulative effects from the 50s to the mid 70s and from the mid 70s to nowadays? Because I saw that you cut the analysis after. So you perform for the whole period and then you cut after the great financial crisis, and you have good reasons for doing that. And we have COVID more recently. But if I understood, so the way I kind of see it, and I believe there is some evidence in that direction, is that you have like a new technological paradigm also starting from the 80s onwards, right? We can think in terms of IT technologies that are becoming much more important in the 80s and changes of that kind. So it's like an innovation wave that started in the 50s saturates in the 80s, and then you have another innovation wave or another technological paradigm somehow starting from the 80s. And I'm saying it in very bad words, but you get the main idea. Something is happening in the 70s. So do you think it's worth comparing these two periods, or you have reasons to believe that that's not really the way to go?
I think that no doubt what you are suggesting would be relevant. I must say that perhaps we relied on a somewhat, let's say, lazy way of operating, in the sense that we know for sure that the Great Recession could have exerted some very strong effect, and therefore what we want, we reasoned on this point more on an econometric basis rather than something informed by theory, in the sense that we expected that to be a sort of structural break, and therefore we tested only by cutting the sample at that period. But I have little doubts that perhaps in purely economic terms, what you are suggesting could be more interesting than what we actually did, because it is more related to the topic. Yes, of course. As I was showing also in the descriptive analysis, in the end, the surging wave of patenting activity becomes in the late 70s, early 80s. Yes, therefore, I think it could be relevant to do also this additional robustness check. Now, I have nothing to say because I agree basically with what you're saying. So I think it's something relevant.
Yeah, I also agree with Marwell's suggestions, especially because it's in the 70s where you see a first structural break in terms of the trends in labor productivity, but not only. Well, yeah, that's the effect, but also during that period started other factors which might also contribute and are not in your model to the slowdown of labor productivity and measures like the total factor productivity growth, which are something like, it could be like financialization and other macroeconomic phenomena. So not only the relationship between public and private innovation, research and development expenditure. On another topic, what I could see is that there is like a downward trend in the cumulative elasticity of the government research and development, and an upward trend in the private. So it's like compensating the effect of government and private. But overall, what you are reporting is that the effect of research and development on labor productivity is going down. Do you think I got this thing right? So what I could see is that the coefficients are going a little bit like up.
I am trying to, yes, I'm sorry, I'm trying to reopen the presentation but I'm having issues. I don't know why.
So this like compensation is not complete. Overall, the effect is going, it's reducing, but inside each one of these components, private and public, the effect of private is going up and public is going down.
For sure, I'm sorry that I'm not able to recover the relevant slides, but for sure, as I was showing in the model in which we use the total factor productivity as a measure of productivity, in that case, the only relevant in the sense of significant variable in the long term turned out to be the government R&D. Therefore, I would say that at least for that model, although what you are pointing out is interesting, I mean, I've never read the results stressing this point. Therefore, for sure, in general, thank you, because it could be something to check more with more attention. But in that case, granting that what you're saying is correct, in any case, we have that in the long term, but not only in the long term, throughout the whole sample, the private expenditures in R&D do not exert a significant effect. Therefore, I would say that in this case, your point, although in general relevant, loses a bit of relevance because of this. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just reopening just for to check myself, because I'm not able to show them.
But one potential problem, which is also related with Marwell's suggestion, is that, okay, these cumulative elasticities, they are not the parameters of the original model changing in time. So the model, the SVAR model, computes the parameters for the whole period, right? And then you only calculate a cumulative elasticity based on exactly the same coefficients. But if you allowed for some structural change in the coefficients by computing the coefficients in different time periods, you might find other type of patterns in the elasticities. And if you're maybe using some software that allows you to program, probably I'm pretty sure you're doing that, you might play around with different time windows and somehow to see some, because this methodology doesn't allow you to change the coefficient in time, right? They have to be fixed. But by changing the time window, you might find you might want to see the dynamics, and that could provide some robustness to the results, or to find new patterns.
I was checking also. No, thank you also for this other point, which is also something that we could check. But I was looking at the case of labor productivity. It is true that somewhat by the end of the simulation periods, there is a rise in the coefficients for what concerns private R&D. However, they do not match the size of the the coefficients for what concerns public expenditure. Therefore,
overall,
correct in pointing out this sort of reversion in the trend, but still the absolute value does not match that of public. I'm sorry that I'm not able. I don't know why it doesn't go as in the presentation, but however. But thank you, because it was something that I was not considering. I mean, I was just looking mostly on the average values to show comparisons through simpler statistics. But yes, this is something also to point out.
One last comment is that if you want to enrich maybe the justification of using the TFP measure for productivity, which is something that comes from production functions. But you know, the total factor productivity is then it is the negative of the rate of cost reduction within this framework of induced technical change. So it has also other type of representation in an alternative technical change models. Yeah.
This is another point that comes up quite often. We totally agree about the fact that if we have to use a measure of productivity, this must be labor productivity instead of total factor productivity, because of the main problems as you are recalling. In this case, we made the decision to use total factor productivity, in particular because of the kind of literature we want to tackle, in the sense that if you go through the literature about supply-side secular stagnation, the bulk of the literature uses total factor productivity as the main indicator.
Yeah, of course.
Therefore, our choice was entirely driven by this strategic consideration. If we want to create somewhat an exchange with this literature, if we want to have an impact, unfortunately, we have to, to also see things by means of indicators that they use as well. But yes, on purely theoretical grounds, the point is there. I mean, total factor productivity suffers from many drawbacks that we perfectly know. Absolutely.
Yeah, but not the question is not about my comments about the interpretation, because you are finding empirical relationship. So how are you going to frame, or you're going to interpret these findings? One way is to the traditional interpretation of total factor productivity, but another one for the exactly same result is that what you are measuring is actually a measure of cost reduction. So how in expenditure in research and development is helping to reduce the unit cost of the of production.
May I, if you have some, because I'm not acquainted with this literature that you are mentioning, but please, if you have some specific reference, send it to me, because it can be very interesting to interpret results as you are suggesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another last check, but again, on YouTube, I don't see comments. Therefore, I would say, I don't know if Marvel has something. Okay. I would say that given that the other two presenters did not show up in the session, I can once again thank the organizers of the conference, thank all the participants that also followed the session on the YouTube channel, and we can close this session. And I hope.
Yeah, let me just tell you that even we have friends that are following on the YouTube after the session is concluded. So this discussion here, it's in the web, and it's going to be in the web forever now. And if you check the other parallel sessions, they have a relatively high level of visualizations that happen exactly after the section actually happened. So the two papers that were presented here are very, very important. And as part of the organizing committee of this workshop, I would like to thank you for sharing your results with us.
Thank you, Marvel, and we hope that the follow-up discussion on YouTube is very lively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take care, guys.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks for everything.
Bye.